Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. It's a beautiful Friday in December. Thank you all for stopping by and joining us for this special edition of Political Trade Secrets. Today we're going to be talking about ancient history and modern history and the present. We're going to be bringing it all together. We'll be talking about Cicero, Donald Trump, and so many other great persuaders in history. And I am really pleased to be joined by my co-host, Sean Bartley. Sean, how you doing today?
Doing well. Good morning to you. Good morning. Glad to have everybody joining us. So really appreciate that. And how are you this morning?
I'm wonderful. I'm really excited. This is I always find this time of year to be a special time of year, clearly with Christmas and everything. But this is a time for reflection and moving into the Christmas season, into the new year, and thinking about what might be possible in 2021. So I always enjoy this time of year. Beyond just the holiday spirit, it's a time for reflection and looking ahead at the same time. So very exciting and a great time to be with loved ones. So how about you? What's going on in your life?
Yeah, well, it's great being here in North Central Ohio. Another snowy day, but nice day, and and looking forward to this conversation. I think this is one that people will really enjoy. So
yeah. Well, I agree. And if you're joining us from anywhere around the internet, I recommend joining the conversation. So we're going to be talking about current events, but we're going to be talking about some historical things. It's going to be fun. And if you have any questions, if you think we're crazy, let us know. Whatever you want to say, wherever you're watching. So we're on 12 different platforms. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, we're live right now. If you post a comment, it comes all back here, and we're able to respond to any of that and bring you into the conversation. And if you're listening on one of the podcasting platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a review and let us know what you like about the show, and we'll do more of that. Leave us a rating. And also, if you would please, one of the things that we really appreciate, a lot of people have been sharing our episodes, and it is one way that we have been able to kind of break through some of the antics of the various social media companies to reduce the traffic of conservatives online. So when you share our episodes, that really does break through that filter, and we really do appreciate it. So, Sean, before we get started with our topic today, making Rome great again, if you wouldn't mind just telling people about some of our sponsors who make all this possible.
Well, we appreciate our sponsors helping us make this show great every day. And it starts with the work we do at Olson Strategies. So it's www.olsonstrategies.com. That's OLSON strategies.com. Look, you're thinking about getting in the arena, maybe running for office, or seeing how you can best fit in political leadership. Maybe it's by setting up an organization, maybe, whatever it might be. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it and let you know what is possible and see how we may be able to work together to make that happen. So reach out to us at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. And we'd be glad to really go through all the stuff that you've heard even this week in what we've been talking about. We really bring that to our consulting. So it's a real opportunity for you to have an advantage from people who think about this in a way that is intentional daily. So
Yeah.
Do that, and we'd love to have a conversation with you about it. We're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. This is the one-on-one conversations that you have with another human being about your campaign. And look, we talked about it a couple of days ago, where you can't, if you're running statewide in a place like Texas, you personally can't go knock on every door. And so Grassfire is one of the ways to do that, to actually have canvassing happen in a way that can break through and make a difference. So
go big or go home.
Exactly right. And so if it's going to make a difference and it's going to be something that's going to work in your campaign, you need to have really a force behind it. And so that's what Grassfire does. And where do they get to deliver your message? Where do they get your vision out to folks? Well, it's on the doorstep. It's in front of the grocery store, or it's over the phone. So canvassing, petitioning, live calling, that's Grassfire. Grassfire also fuels 10centtexting.com. So look, people open text messages. It's what do they do with them afterwards? Like right after that, what happens, right? So that's where you need to have a compelling message that actually breaks through, so that it's not just some text they got, but it's actually something that can have impact and make a difference. That's where 10-cent texting comes in. They literally wrote the book on texting. We think it's the only book on texting that exists. So,
yeah, at least for political texting, at least right now.
Exactly right. And so it's there for download. So work with the people who really forged the plane here on when it comes to texting. And 10-cent texting is the way to get your message out inexpensively, quickly, and richly, with an image, a GIF, or even a short video right there in your text message. So reach out to them today.
So I am reminded your stat that look at that.
Yes.
You can see it. It's I've got like 58. That little red dot there at the top.
Yes.
Of it says 58 messages that I have not read, and I think most of those are probably from the president texting me. I'm sure he's sitting there at his desk texting me all of his fundraising pleas. But anyway, I can get a signed MAGA hat. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Go for that. Anyway, so that the thing is, it is 82% of people cannot stand seeing that red dot with the however many unread text messages. I will say at now 51, it's almost a losing battle. So who knows? But, no, there's a few text lists that I'm on because I want to see what other people are doing.
Yep.
That I get so many, it's ridiculous. But by the end of the day, I will have gone through all of them. And if it was a visual, anybody who does a video or it does a GIF or does a just regular picture, I am so much more likely to stick around and actually look at what they have to say. And I mentioned earlier this week, I was talking to someone who is a big part of the American Conservative Union and the head of it, and how getting they're much better at it than most people. They send pictures and other things, and I'm much more likely to do stuff. And I actually gave money to that. To some of their efforts because of that. So anyway, very good. Well, thank you for that, Sean.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to make sure that we note that's happening out there in the public right now? We'll probably bring some of this into what we're going to talk about in a moment, but anything in the news that you think we really need to make sure that we talk about?
Well, I would just say, look, now Moderna has been approved for their vaccine. Look, we were told, I believe it was in March when Operation Warp Speed began, that this was impossible, couldn't be done.
Mm-hmm.
And now not only do we have one vaccine online and actually being given, we have a second one that is approved. It's truly remarkable. I live here in Ohio, and today nursing home residents that want the vaccine are being it's being administered to them today.
That's amazing.
Another 300, I believe, another 300,000 doses are coming to Ohio next week.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, look, I don't know what impossible looks like, but I'm certain it doesn't look like this.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's here's the thing. This is why President Trump's first term has been one of the most effective, and why his second term, whenever it happens, is going to be remarkable. And I think people are going to get it. Like, look, this guy does things that people say are impossible. The media just sets this stuff up perfectly.
Mhm.
So anyway, I think it's quite amazing. The vice president received the vaccine today, and that is smart. That they're out there getting attention for this activity that could make a huge difference. I know there's some people who don't want to get a vaccine, but I get that. And this is something that is really unprecedented. And the president created the environment, the context, and the messaging, ultimately Operation Warp Speed. It was expected this was going to happen fast, clearly, and it did. And he's done so many moonshot type things like this. It is really, really remarkable. So today we're going to be talking about, the persuasive abilities of a very well-known, high-profile person, a man that some would call a great showman. And, we've been talking about some of those ideas here just a moment ago, giving things name like Operation Warp Speed. That makes things just a little bit more interesting than other things. A person who has used the powers of persuasion and showmanship to reach the heights of power. And when most probably would have thought that it was impossible, and that he didn't have the background to do it. And, our hero, he grew up on the outskirts of the city, and his family were frankly modest in comparison to the rich elites and established families of the city. So he had to work a little bit extra hard to make his way in the world to get to the very top. And not only was he successful professionally, he also became a prolific author, known for dispensing no-nonsense advice and a lot of self-help treatises. Even after several different careers, he rose to one of the most powerful positions in the world. And he did so at a time when this once unquestioned world power was threatened by decline. And so he set out to make Rome great again. And of course, you may have been thinking, based on the title of this program, you probably had an idea that I wasn't talking about Donald Trump. But in case you were, you'd probably be, you could be forgiven, because the truth is that there's a lot of commonalities between Donald Trump and Marcus Tullius Cicero. Cicero became consul, which was at that time that was the most powerful position in the Roman Empire. And he had to, much like Donald Trump, he had to work his way up from a fairly modest background. They weren't, the poor necessarily, but they definitely weren't from high society. And he had to work very hard to get where he was. And like Trump, he was a best-selling author, or at least for the time. Actually, today, his writings are, for any of the ancient Romans, we have more of his writings than anybody. And a lot of his writings were very straightforward, kind of self-help advice, like how-to type books, much like most of President Trump's books. I don't know how many bestsellers President Trump has had. I think he's in the teens now for the number of books that he's had published. And he was known for playing to the Coliseum, and, with these, getting all the crowds, like just people lined up to listen to his speeches, and, really getting them roused up. And, people loved his brutal takedowns of his opponents, and he would just get people whipped up in a frenzy. And even as he rose to consul, one of the most powerful positions, or the most powerful position in Rome, he even took on a conspiracy, a coup of sorts, with his main opponent, Catiline, and many conspirators throughout the government. And it's those most brutal takedowns against Catiline that are the most famous today, and are the most reminiscent of politics today. And I wouldn't say that it's not just Donald Trump. Clearly, Donald Trump had a classical education, going to a military academy. He was I'm sure, exposed to the ideas of Cicero and rhetoric and everything else. But these are things that have been around in politics forever, clearly for a couple thousand years. When he became consul was 63 BC, which is quite a ways back. And it's amazing to think that really there's nothing new under the sun. So, Sean, I know you've looked into it as well. And what are some of the things that you're kind of struck between the similarities between then and now? And then we're going to go into the specifics of some of the big points and some of the real how-tos that Cicero employed, some of which he told people about and told them to do, some that he didn't necessarily tell them to do, but he definitely used. Probably didn't want to give his best secrets away. But anyway, just some initial thoughts as we set this up.
Yeah. Well, I think when you really look at, hey, we have a lot of ways to get information out to people. We talked about a number of ways right before we started this with who our sponsors are. Things that they didn't necessarily have at their disposal then. So when you really look at this, what you're talking about is really being able to break through with the spoken word and have word of that spread was really the main way to get your message out. So that's what I was really struck by, is that you had to be a great orator, and he really talked about delivery, and we'll get into that. But that is really one of the most important things, is being able to deliver. When you've got that, be at the bullet pulpit now, but he'd be speaking to the throngs of people. Really, you got to be able to deliver to keep their attention, and he had a lot of different ways to do that. So
yeah, as he said, it's better to deliver a poor speech well than to deliver a great speech poorly. And that was his general sense, is that delivery really made a difference. Like, if you could capture people's attentions and you could really go into what I think his biggest point, which was, I'll just read a quote from him. By the way, I just wanted to show, these are two of the writings. So this is Cicero, How to Win an Argument. And then this is Donald Trump, How to Get Rich. Basically the same genre of books, just 2,000 years in between. And of course, there's the Trump, The Art of the Deal. I mean, it's very, very similar. And by the way, in How to Get Rich, Donald Trump spends a lot of time on public speaking and how to go about doing it. His number one piece of advice, though, he has actually a whole bullet point, but the main thing is to basically do what Regis Philbin does, which is to have a lot of energy and to get people excited, which is basically what we're going to talk about now. So to quote Cicero, "To sway the audience's emotions is victory. For among all things, it is the single most important in winning verdicts." So basically, Aristotle had laid out in the previous couple hundred years the idea of logos, ethos, and pathos. And logos was reason and logic and whatnot. Ethos was character and characterization, and then pathos was emotion. And while Cicero is very clear in his writings that he employed all of those, the most important by far to him, that if you didn't have it, you couldn't communicate, and that was emotion. And that while you wanted to use logos or reason to get to a good decision and to come up with the right direction to take people, if you tried to explain that to people that way, you were not going to make any difference.
Yep.
Using characterization to maybe have yourself be viewed well and your opponent viewed poorly, and then using emotion to really add life to the presentation, that's what would make the difference for folks. And that's probably the biggest thing of all, is the emotional effect. And you see that in politics today. The bean counters, Republicans can be the bean counters quite often. They're the more accountant view of everything. And something that I think we deal with the most is that people who want to make a a non-impassioned plea for something and want to make just a rational argument for it, it just doesn't move people. And you have to be able to bring in some emotion to it. Any thoughts about that before we go into some of these absolute best tools that he has?
Yeah, I think it is the thing that I think people fall in the trap of. It was interesting. I actually was watching George H.W. Bush's 1988 speech to the Republican convention, and what I thought was great is he started with, I'm here to be Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. And then he gave the most impassioned, emotional speech of his life.
Wow.
Where it was not like just the facts. That's where he said, read my lips and other things that he basically gave the red meat speech to make sure that the folks that were the Reagan folks were on board with him again.
He did basically a bait and switch is what he did. Because he was playing to the Coliseum, and he used ethos, he used the character or the characterization. He wanted you to think of him as just the facts, which puts him in a very positive light. You're going to trust him, and then he went and played on your emotions.
Yeah, actually, for folks, he really painted and he painted some vivid pictures of what was going on, and so. In fact, he probably painted too vivid of a picture of what the Democrats are going to do to him when it came to raising taxes.
Yes.
He said, they're going to come at me and I'm going to say no. They're going to come at me again and I'm going to say no. And then, then he had the famous line.
And then on the fourth time, I'll say, all right. That's the fact that he didn't get to.
Yes. But the funny thing was that it's, of course, exactly how it worked. Until it got to read my lips, and then it was. Yeah. But it was such a vivid picture that people go, I think that's how it works in Washington. I totally get that. And this guy is going to say, heck no, we're not doing that. That's, so.
It helped him win that election, and it sealed the fate for the next one.
Yes. But it is, but it is interesting because I think what some people think is just the facts. That's all people need. And look, if you're not connecting and you are not getting to their emotions, the facts, in my opinion, don't really, they don't deliver the day.
Yeah.
And
it really doesn't whatsoever. He talks about how you really, and we've talked about this a lot. We talked about it in our context creation episode, which is really one of our better ones. They're all great, but this is it's something that we do specifically that's very much focused on the audience and the experience that you leave them with, which is around a lot of that's around emotions, like the experiential nature of it, and then who you have to be that, and that's all in delivery, all very much based in Cicero. I will have to say we should give Cicero some credit because that did play a role in our methodology. Yeah. And one of the things that he talks about is really getting to understand the audience and what moves them, what is emotional for them, what really matters to them, and to really look at that. And he talks about how if there's already a natural mood, there's already an emotion that's already there, that he uses that, and he just is a sail, and he lets that fill him up with wind to propel him forward. And so if it's already an emotion there, he just plays off of that. He uses it, but sometimes he has to really dig to find out how he can stir those passions, as he says, stir those emotions to do that. And by the way, this isn't just something from 2,000 years ago with Cicero, or even with just politicians today. This is something that neuroscientists have talked about probably for the last 30 or so years. So it's something that they found is that if somebody has the part of their brain that is the locust of emotions, if that is damaged, they end up having a terrible time making basic decisions like what to have for lunch, what to do next, all these basic things. If they don't have access to really their emotions, they have a hard time with making any kind of decision in moving forward. And so that goes to the idea that really for people to decide that you're right or to come along with you. To be persuaded, they really have to have access to their emotions, because at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhat of a gut thing. So we'll go through a few of these, and I'm just going to lay some of them out, and then we'll come back to them individually. Visuals, in particular, using props and visual aids is something he was well known for, as well as a visual or vivid language. And that's something he did quite a bit. Characterization, we talked about ethos. Labeling is something he did. Think Crooked Hillary. He was able to focus on people's personal defects. Guilt by association. In association in general, you associate two things, they're going to be very persuasive. Exaggeration is something that he used, or taking something to the absurd. Humor, us versus them, repetition, and I'm sure there's even more than that, but that's what we're going to focus on today in using that. And clearly, these are things that President Trump uses. Frankly, I would say other highly persuasive people out there use them as well. The Democrats traditionally in our career have been better at using these tools, I would say, than Republicans and various political leaders through that time. So let's start with, I'm going to read a quick quote. So one of the things that he was well known for is when he was the consul, there was basically a coup attempt, a conspiracy against the government. I think, Russia collusion and everything else. And fortunately for him, he was able to completely demolish his opponent, Catiline, who was at the source of that. And this is a quote of his on Catiline. Citizens, Lucius Catiline, raging with audacity, breathing wickedness, evilly plotting the destruction of his country, threatening the city and ourselves with fire and sword, has at long last been expelled from Rome. Whether driven away by our words or having left on his own initiative, he is gone, he has fled, he has escaped, he has run away. No longer that unnatural fiend will be within the walls, devising schemes to demolish those same walls. That's just an example of some of the stuff. There's actually some even more hard-hitting things that he says about them, and there's a few things already at play there. There's visual language, so let's go to that first.
Yeah.
Visual.
Well, I think, look, the breathing wickedness, evilly plotting. I mean,
you can just imagine him, in the corner, like breathing this wickedness and evilly plotting with his friends, kind of like in the cartoons when they're plotting, and then one of them looks up and the other one, that's kind of what you imagine.
Yeah, destruction. You can visualize what destruction looks like. Fire and sword. I mean, you can see that. He is gone. He has fled. He has escaped. He has run away. I mean, he's not. He wants to make it very clear. This guy scurried away.
Yeah, and he's an unnatural fiend. This is something that Donald Trump does all the time. Is he puts words together that don't necessarily. They're not typical. Unnatural fiend. What is a natural fiend? I'm not even quite sure what an unnatural fiend is, let alone what a natural fiend is. But he's even worse than a natural fiend. He's an unnatural fiend, and it makes you stop and think a second. What's an unnatural fiend? And it has a stickiness to it that catches him. That'll be more what we talk about in labeling.
Well, I think when you talk about so the visual language, I think an example of what you were just talking about with look, when he was talking about the illegal immigration, he painted a vivid picture of what's going on. And there's a reason it stuck. It was already something that was under the surface that people just weren't talking about. But when he talked about it, they're like,
there's already emotions there that could fill his sails.
Absolutely. And so he was able to tap into that. But then he really painted a visual that was hard to argue. And he knew who his real opponents were. And they were caught flat-footed. Like, it was a terrain that the media at that point was not used to fighting on. And so when that happened, they were able to, really knock that back, and they had to work a little bit to confront this. Like, before they could just go out and say, no, 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 just because, 100% of people who don't follow the rules to come here are here illegally doesn't mean they're criminals. I mean, it took some explaining to try to break that down. So that's
I think the fact that we're about to complete 450 miles of wall goes to this ability to, one, use visual language. You can imagine the wall in your mind. And when he said, and when, if they do X, I can't remember what it was, we're going to just add 10 more feet to the wall. You can just, and I don't know what your wall looked like. Mine looked like, kind of this, I don't know, garrison or something. But anyway, I just saw all of a sudden this extra 10 feet of concrete went on top of it.
Like, yep.
And I could totally see it. My wall was a really well-designed wall. I think the one we ended up with was great, but I really liked my version of the wall and what was in my mind. And, I imagine there'd be some graffiti on one side and there'd be, be nice and pristine on the other.
And it, remember, it's going to be a big, beautiful wall.
Yes, big and beautiful.
With wide doors.
Mm-hmm. So. By the way, that's really that is a good point. So he paints the picture, constantly was painting the picture of the wall. But what was also going on there is he did always have he would have his different hand movements, which is something that is actually Cicero spends a lot of time in his writings talking about hand gestures and how hand gestures can further push a point and how it can also actually evoke some of those emotions. And in a way, almost like sign language, you can tell people, what they're supposed to feel when you tap on your chest or whatever it was. He would use these almost like he said that an orator is like an actor. You have to be ready to perform the part. And I think of President Trump performing the part. I don't know if you remember when he was running against Rubio and he had the water bottle, and he does the whole thing about Rubio and his need for so much water. He's just like so thirsty, and then he's like doing like almost like a priest, and he's throwing water over the stage. And it really stuck in your mind. Yeah, this Rubio guy, he's got a real problem. He needs so much water. Does it matter? I don't know, but it really diminished the guy in your mind. And he would do that constantly to people. You can imagine Rubio just like sucking wind, trying to get another drink of water. And it doesn't make sense. I don't know, but it definitely has an effect.
I think that's a great lead into characterization and labeling here, because I think we've got some good ones.
Well, before we go into that, one thing I want to say is he always, so on the visual language and the vivid language, when we talked about Unnatural Fiend and everything else, one thing that he did is he always would pick the more interesting way to say something. If you have two ways to choose to say something, pick the more interesting way. And his process, he writes about this in one of his books. He talks about in style, like after you've thought through the arguments, after you've put everything down on paper, you then think about stylistically how you can make it more interesting, and you can have vivid language. So going into labeling, that's a place where he has a lot of vivid language.
Yeah. So just before that, I think when you were talking about the water bottle, also made me think of props and visual aids, right?
Yes.
And yeah, and so it was a prop. It was a visual aid, and you really got it. And and I think you can really look back. A lot of political figures try to do this. It is one of the reasons we talked about it the other day, when the reason the Democrats were so upset about the president delivering his acceptance speech at the White House, in front of the White House, because they got the visual. It was not going to be hard to picture this guy as president if he's standing in front of the White House delivering the speech. So
it's also why you never see him out of a suit, or maybe occasionally in professional looking golf clubs. But other than that, you always see him in the suit. He gets that.
And And Dustin, tell us, Cicero was also great at this, and
it was maybe one of his greatest skills, and I was about to skip over it. I can't believe it. No, so he is famous for, he didn't have PowerPoint back then. He went to great extremes. So he was giving a speech in the forum, and to make sure that he was able to evoke the gods and evoke a moral idea in his speech, he actually had a statue of Jupiter erected to be behind him, so he could reference Jupiter throughout the speech and keep just bringing it back to that. And one of the things he's most famous for is he would use, like in one case, because he was a lawyer also, and he was famous for his speeches. Back then, people would go and actually watch legal cases for entertainment, because they'd see the takedown of both sides, and great orators, and people would try to just cram in to watch his cases. And he was famous for using like the children of his his clients. In one famous case, his client was needed a defense. He had been accused of something, and he had a newborn baby. And so for the whole, for all of his arguments, Cicero cradled the newborn and referenced the newborn through the whole thing while he made all of his arguments. But the whole argument really was the newborn baby, and holding that newborn baby, and will that baby have its father, and everything else. And he was willing to evoke that impassioned plea for the father by using the newborn baby and cradling it through the speech. And clearly he won that, and it was I don't know if you could get away with that in a court today, but that would be quite brilliant.
Well, this is one area where I do think the world has changed, because look, we don't really pay attention to court cases anymore. Oh wait, and and of course, no attorneys try any tricks like props or visual aids, like maybe a bloody glove that doesn't fit, for example.
Yep.
And they certainly wouldn't come up with some catchy phrase to try to.
They would never do that. By the way, that is another thing that he's known for in his language is rhyming. And for us, we don't really get access to that, because I don't speak Latin, I don't read Latin, so we don't really get the effect of it. But he was also well known for rhyming his the things that he wanted to have people remember. And one of the things that we use in our work with our clients is we use a kind of a way to think about communications that you want to have people take action. And we think about attention, intention, and retention. So attention is, you have to get people's attention. And this is something he got. You had to inflame the passions. That got people's attention. You had to give them visuals. You had to have a little spark of showmanship in order to get people's attention. Then you had to have an intention. So, he knew where he wanted to take people, and he would want to know how he wanted to leave them. So that's what we mean by intention, is like the experience. So there's some impassioned emotions that he wanted them to have. But then the final thing is, if you want people to take action or to come alongside you and agree with you, you have to have retention, which means basically they have to remember what you're talking about, or the whole gist of it, at the point of when they have to do something about it. And the main thing there is it has to stick in the memory. And you just made a really excellent point, is that the rhyming in particular is something that he would do with his phrases. And Johnny Cochran is one of the best examples. He's another Ciceronian today, or he's now passed, but he's somebody who really did use these skill sets. And I'm sure he was a student of Cicero too. But if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. And of course, in that whole scene, first you have OJ walk up, and he tries to put on the glove, and whether the glove fit or not, who knows? But he just couldn't get his hand into his glove. I don't know anybody who puts their glove on like this, but anyway, OJ did. He just couldn't get it on, and if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. And that was very much a Cicero way to do that, using the visuals and rhyming to have it stick in people's brain.
Yeah, and what Marcia Clark could have done at that point to, you see a glove that doesn't fit, and it is the piece of evidence you've unveiled that it's his. I mean, she can say, well, he's gotten fat or whatever, but
well, it's a perfect case of they inflamed passions in that moment, and it was pretty persuasive, for ill or for good. And this is something actually that Cicero dealt with, because he is very much a predecessor to the idea that everyone deserves a good defense, even the guilty. And that is something that we have in our system of law. I don't know if it's as strong as it once was, but the idea that people do get to have a good defense, and so he would defend people who were not necessarily the best people. And he famously says that he would be very pleased with himself when he was able to very persuasively make an argument for them and move the jury, even if the person did not deserve it. He talked about it, how he was able to throw dust in the eyes of the jury. And that's what he did. By the way, we're not making a moral or judgment on any of this stuff. We're just saying that this is from time immemorial, and it was very well thought out 2,000 years ago. And there are many people who employ this either by natural inclination or they are actually students of Cicero themselves today. Well, let's go into the anything else you want to say about the visual aids and props?
No.
President Trump does this all the time. He uses visual aids and props constantly.
Well, and you even see it, Joe Biden's trying to do it. I mean, folks, there is no office of president-elect. Just so you know. I mean, that it doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Despite what his backdrop says literally every day. So it doesn't, but he's trying to say, hey, this is real. And so give credit where credit's due on that.
Yeah, and he did this also on election night. So there's definitely, we mentioned this last week. We did the Cialdini episode. Cialdini, by the way, I don't know if he ever studied Cicero, but many of Cicero's methodologies have been backed up with what Cialdini's 6 persuasion triggers were. One is testimony, is something that Cicero used often, which is basically social proof, having people come in and lend credence, having more voices. If more people who agree with something, the more likely you're going to go along with it. So he used testimony, but he also used testimony of people with authority. And when you had people of authority, then people were more likely to go along with it. This is all backed up by Cialdini. It makes me think of it is that we had noted that there's definitely seems to be somebody like him working for the Biden team who has been definitely pushing certain visuals. In particular, on election night, they had him, come out and say he wasn't going to declare victory, but that is a case of, saying the opposite of what you're doing intentionally. And when they had the motorcade drive up to do the speech, that was the moment. They just had Arizona called by Fox News, and everybody's wondering, like, what the heck's that? That doesn't sound right. But we know now that the Fox News decision desk was talking with the Biden campaign and letting them know immediately when things happen. And so they were able to have that visual of a presidential motorcade driving up, and that's all that mattered. It didn't matter what he said. I have no idea what he said. If you can remember, you're pretty remarkable.
It was actually pretty poor what he said. I mean, he kind of stumbled all over the place, and what I remember from the actual speech is that Jill Biden actually had to feed him lines.
Yeah, and she had to pull him around the stage.
Yeah, and it was like, so if you didn't see the motorcade part, and you only saw the speech part, you're like, this guy is a defeated loser.
Yeah. But the motorcade was very, very, very powerful persuasion, and had a real impact. We could spend a whole day talking about visual language, vivid language, visual props, and visuals in general. The main thing here, the last thing is just say you don't always have access to visuals, but you can use visual language and you can use vivid language. So you can always make your language more interesting. So if you have two words, one's boring and one's interesting, use the interesting word to describe something, even if it's not the perfect word. And then also using vivid present-based language, like someone was there. So speaking in present tense, there I was, and I looked up, and I saw this gargantuan, grin looking at me with, whatever, I don't know, just whatever it is. But you paint a picture, and you can imagine yourself in the movie there in that moment, and in using vivid language like that. Characterization. So this is ethos, the idea of establishing character both for yourself and the opponent. And we talk about labeling and the focus on personal defects of your opponent, or actually labeling yourself with good adjectives. And by far, President Trump has taken this to the level that is, well, it's pretty close to Unnatural Fiend is a pretty strong label that Cicero gave Cataline. But Crooked Hillary, I think, would give that a run for its money today, or Lion Ted, our very most favorite, because it's so visual at the same time as it has it just says so much, and he couldn't get out of it, which was low energy Jeb.
Absolutely.
Your energy drops when you say it. Low energy Jeb. Like you just don't want to be around that guy.
Well, and then what I would say is, even the way he labeled himself, after having the China virus, he's like, I feel like Superman, and he said, I think I have the S on my chest.
I like that. JT says Slick Willie. That's a great one.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure Rich Limbaugh came up with that one.
Yes, and
Rich is also very good at this.
Yes, and Clinton has lived up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Slick Willie, Crooked Hillary. It just goes on, and it's been quite fascinating to watch. And they tried to come out with stuff against Trump, but none of it really worked. And we've been able to make fun of them because we just throw it back on them with Orange Man bad, and we diminish them by saying how pathetic their attacks on him are. Sure. Guilt by association is another thing that is really clear, especially when he talks about Cataline. So he talks about the prostitutes that Cataline's around, all the the derelicts of society that he aligns himself with. And he never actually says that Cataline is any of those things. He just says that you wouldn't be surprised if you found him surrounded by such people.
Yeah. Well, and it works the other way too. So remember, early on, using President Trump as the example, we're going to say Merry Christmas again. Mm-hmm. He put himself on the side of people who say Merry Christmas. So if you're somebody who would prefer to say Merry Christmas, you're
with him.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who I don't think even liked him at that time, and they're like, well, that's just obvious. Yeah. Well, I'm for that. I think it made a big difference. And by the way, we get to say Merry Christmas right now. Nowadays, if someone says Happy Holidays to you and you say Merry Christmas, they act like they're a little bit like, oh, I was really insulting. I should say Merry Christmas back. Merry Christmas back. Just think, 5 years ago, that was a thing. We thought we were done with being able to say Merry Christmas. And he completely changed language there.
And same with kneeling, during the national anthem. I think the president did a great job of really, outlining that. so you think about these things. There's really two ways it works on that, and so even looking at Dustin's background, being with the flag and patriotism and whatnot.
That may be intentional. You want to be associated with the things that you care about and you like.
Absolutely.
And, Uncle Sam and the flag are things that you want to be associated with. It's amazing to me that the Democrats have so totally given up on that. And at this point, it's even been shown in scientific research that if you view the American flag before you vote, you're more likely to vote Republican. It has this, and it's what Cialdini talks about in Persuasion. It's what we call context. It creates a context that people will be more likely to vote Republican. It just has all of this imagery and association and whatnot that then affects your thinking and your decision making. It's very amazing that that's the case. And JT says, "Merry Christmas," and Merry Christmas back to you as well.
Likewise, yes, thank you, JT. And then under characterization, I think about one more thing here, which is this idea of I'm not going to tell you all the bad things about my opponent.
Yes, I love that.
And and then proceeding to tell you the bad things about your opponent. I am not going to tell you that he.
I'm not going to tell you anything about their brushes with the law. I'm not going to tell you about their rumored indiscretions. I'm not going to tell you that they might be hanging around prostitutes or what have you. And I will say, JT had another one that of these labels.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever use a term like Blomala. I think that's terrible, and I don't think people should think about that. I think it's something that you should definitely not ever compare her to something so terrible as that. I just really think that that's something you wouldn't do, is think about Blomala and how her background. I would never even think that we should ever go to the place to talk about how her background is not to the level of somebody who we would want to have in that office. I would just not do that.
Yeah, we're not going to bring up her indiscretions here.
No.
Not going to do it.
And I just don't think it's as effective to do that. So the question we get here is, aren't positive politics more effective? Well, I don't know about positive or negative. I don't know that this is necessarily positive nor negative. I do think it presents choice and it presents contrast. And we've talked about the Olson strategy sweet spot, your strengths, your opponent's weaknesses, and what voters care about. And then where they overlap is the sweet spot. So you're presenting choice. So you're always going to use characterizations, a big part of this.
Well,
good adjectives on you, not so great adjectives on your opponent. And you may not even have to talk about your opponent. If you talk about the things that are great about you that overlap with their weaknesses, that in and of itself presents a choice.
And I would argue that this kind of goes into humor a little bit as well, which is another thing that Cicero talks about using. Neither nice or mean or whatever. The Colorado Senate race in 2014, Mark Udall became known as Mark Uterus. For talking about reproductive rights all the time, so much so that even people who supported that idea and whatnot were like, "Yeah, this guy talks about that a little much," but it was humorous. I mean, you heard it and you go, "Oh yeah, that's a thing," and it stuck, and and I think it made a difference.
Well, one of the most terrible things that Cicero probably did, maybe it wasn't the most terrible thing, Catiline was executed after all these. Well, he also tried a conspiracy against the government, so he was a traitor, I guess. I wasn't there, but maybe one of the worst rhetorical things that he did is he humorously had the entire crowd laughing because he just went after his opponent and how notoriously ugly his children were.
Yeah.
Crowd just laughing. And, ultimately, is that effective? Yes, it was effective. He was able to completely have the crowd on his side against the opponent. Is it right? Is it good? No, but it just is.
And I think about the use of humor by President Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to this idea of humor. Look, he was being attacked in 1984 for his age,
Mm-hmm.
until he dispelled that in one move. When he said, "I am not going to use my opponent's youth and inexperience against him." So it was that rhetorical device of "I'm not going to use something against somebody," and it was funny because, like, okay, I guess we're taking this off the table now, and it was the thing, that was available for the Mondale campaign. And so once that happened, it is a way to diffuse things that could be used against you as well. And I think
the famous moment, we did an episode years ago, back when we were only a podcast audio. I did an episode with Mort Kondracki, who was one of the panelists in that debate, and he said, being in the room, that is when the debate ended. He said he was on the side of the room, and then there's Reagan, and then there's Mondale, and he just saw across the room as Mondale just kind of put his head down and was laughing. Like you could tell that he was aware that was basically it, that he had just lost the whole thing, at least the debate, maybe even the whole election at that moment. And anyway, it's a pretty amazing conversation. People should go check that out. It's available on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or any of the different podcasting platforms. You can go listen to the Mort Kondracki episode and him telling of that specific event and being there and in the room when that happened. Pretty amazing bit of history to be a part of. Let's say, so we've talked about repetition a little bit. I mean, obviously he would use it over and over again. We talked about humor. Us versus them is something else. Exaggeration or hyperbole. I mean, those are all present in politics today, and would really create a polarization. Whether this is good or bad, it would present two choices for people. Anything else that you want to say is, I think what I recommend is, I said it at the beginning, he wrote very much like no nonsense advice. And I would say even to this day, and it's been translated, it's not like reading like really old Greek that's been translated that's really hard. This is pretty straightforward stuff that he wrote, and it's really based on what's effective and how you can be effective. And I highly recommend people just go get it. And it's really not this is James May is the one who did this translation, and he has things he puts in there to explain some of the context, what was going on, like with Cataline and whatnot. Highly recommend it. It's a quick read, probably like 2 hours to go through that.
The only thing I'll add is that the one thing that Cicero did to really bring this all together was, he said it really came down to delivery, and being able to I think you said it, he had the quote, which is, it's better to deliver a poor speech well than a great speech poorly. Being able to really have energy, we talked about a little earlier, have Regis Philbin type energy.
Yeah. Probably worth looking at some of Trump's. Yes, Regis Philbin energy.
And so, if you're be Philbin-esque in your energy, and really come up with ways to connect with the audience. And it's something we talk about. It's something we do a lot in our work, not just on the consulting side of things, but also making sure that the connections happen with our sponsors and whatnot. So it is something that's very big, and delivery matters.
Yeah.
And so So yeah, so that's something big to remember when you're doing it, and there's a reason groups like Toastmasters and other groups exist.
Yeah, Toastmasters is great. I don't know what they're doing right now with the pandemic, but I assume they do online stuff, which would be just as good. By the way, for us, we view this as an opportunity to publicly speak every single day and prepare and to keep preparing, practicing. That's something. If you're thinking about running for office, getting yourself as many opportunities to practice speaking in public is really good. So, in How to Get Rich, right after the chapter of avoid the handshake whenever possible, which might be one of President Trump's other accomplishments in his first term. So he has a whole section then on public speaking. He has part 1, connect with your audience, and he goes through some of the stuff that we've talked about. Honestly, I think he's doing just like what we're doing, which is basically just stealing from Cicero and for our own content. I think he's doing the exact same thing. He has covered these 11 bases, the art of public speaking, part 2. Study Regis Philbin's one of the main things. Think about the common denominator, which is basically about the emotions of the entire audience. When you're at the podium, you are the entertainer. Be able to poke fun at yourself. Learn to think on your feet. Listen in your daily life. So bring in stories is what he's talking about there. And have a good time. That's the other one that he wants you to know for that. So anyway, it's I highly recommend this book because it's a very fascinating book and a quick read, just like Cicero, honestly. So just a few things, kind of why does this matter now? There's really nothing new under the sun. It's why we study things like I study Sun Tzu and apply it to now. Many years ago, when I first started in political strategy, there wasn't a way to go learn it. You couldn't really go get a political strategy degree. So I developed what I called comparative strategy, which I studied things like Michael Porter, who we talked about yesterday, who's a business strategist. I studied Miyamoto Musashi, who's a samurai and strategist. I studied Sun Tzu, who's an ancient Chinese strategist, in military strategy and whatnot. And the thing is when you look at the stuff, and you look at like Cicero, there's really nothing new under the sun. And you can think about what was specific to that time that maybe doesn't apply now. But it's a little bit easier with the distance of 2,000 years to think about, what's the same and what's different, and to take away the things that can apply now and be effective now. And it actually is very illuminating and enlightening. And it tells you, one, we might be thinking that the things are the worst that they could possibly be right now. But the truth is, there's been many times through history where things were tougher, and people have been pretty much being people the whole time. So, you shouldn't be too shocked about it. And I don't know. Any last thoughts that you have as to why this matters now and why people should look at Cicero?
Well, I think some of these are being employed by the media too. Mm-hmm. So I know we focused a lot on, where it's been used in politics, and I think that's great. Repetition in particular. I think we've talked about this a few times, but you can go on YouTube and watch, 40 different anchors saying the exact same words across the country because, hey, that's what they're sent, and then they just repeat it, and it just keeps getting, repeated out that way. So we're getting repetition a lot of different ways, some ways that we don't even realize.
Yep. And they play to your emotions. If it bleeds, it leads. That used to be the thought. I don't know if that's necessarily their model anymore, but the social media companies, and I would say AI and algorithms in general, their intent, their business model is to inflame. We call it clickbait. Whatever is going to get you to click, whatever is going to be sensational, whatever is going to get you to be inflamed. And what TV, cable news in particular, has learned that if they can get your hair on fire, it keeps you on through the break. Yep. So, there's been for quite some time, there's been analytics around TV, in particular in the late aughts, 2007, 2008 period. Analytics got a lot stronger. And they're able to watch, how much people click off during the commercial breaks, and what guests have people stay on through the commercial break if they're going to be on next. But if you have like a sensational story that's going to start the next segment, people are going to stay through the whole thing. So they use these constantly. Of course, props and visual aids, and visual language, and labeling, guilt by association, exaggeration, all that stuff is there present with the fake news, and it's having an effect on you, which is one reason why we do this, is that if you are aware of these tools of persuasion, you at least will be aware of them potentially when they're actually being used. Even if it's unintentional, they're being used. Repetition, what you think about over and over again, is going to influence you no matter what. Even if you think it's BS at the beginning, if you keep thinking about it, you keep hearing it. This is what they did with the president-elect stuff. It's why they got so offended if you didn't say anything other than president-elect. The more they said it, the more they said it, the more they said it, the more that you were to believe it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because they actually made it a story if you weren't saying it. And then they were creating lists, so guilt by association, of who's not saying it. So, I mean, it was, pretty crazy. But, that's what they were up to.
Yeah, well, this has been fun. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, if you want to, if you have other examples, we've gotten a lot of different names that people have come up through the years. Nasty Nancy, there's another one. So there's a lot of stuff. So thank you for everybody's input today and being a part of the conversation. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and wherever you're watching, on one of the Facebook pages, or you're on YouTube, or you're on any one of them, Periscope, which is going away in the next few months, or Twitter. Periscope's going to move to Twitter, it sounds like. So if you're watching on Twitter, do post a question or comment. We will come back later and we'll respond to it. We really do appreciate that. We're pretty good at coming back in and checking out what people say. And if you're listening on one of the podcasting platforms, whether it's iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please do leave a review and a rating and let us know what you like about the show so we can do a little bit more of that. And then you can also reach out to us on Twitter and on Parler. I am at Dustin Olson on Parler and on Twitter if you want to reach me there. And during the show, I try to check that out if people have questions there as well. And then you can also find Sean Bartley on Twitter at Sean_Bartley, or on Parler at Bartley Sean. And there must be other Seans out there. I think there's a musician.
There is. Yep. So you won't see me crooning at a coffee house, most likely. But I also believe Parler does not do the underscore, so I think that was our biggest hindrance there. So but love to hear from you. And we've got some great sponsors that we'd love to have you check out. First, we'd love to talk with you personally. That's olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com. We want to talk to you about, are you thinking about running for office? Maybe you want to create an organization that can make a difference in your community, the state, the country. Look, however you're looking to make that political difference in the world, reach out to us. We'd love to have that conversation with you. It's Sean, SEAN at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. Reach out to us today. We'd love to talk to you. We're also sponsored by Grassfire. And that's www.grassfire.us. And basically what they do is all of the one-on-one interaction between a voter and your campaign or your issue or whatever it may be. So if you want to have maximum impact on the doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone, it's Grassfire. So don't delay for any of your canvassing, petitioning, or live calling needs. And then Grassfire also fuels 10centtexting.com. What does 10-cent texting do? It basically gives you the ability to reach folks right there on the mobile device. And what does that look, people will open their text messages. Dustin's going to open his later on today. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. Like, what'd you find? And the So the opening is something that happens for most people right now. So what is it that has you break through and actually have them read it and retain it? So look,
and take action.
We talked about attention, intention, and retention today. That is one of the main tenets of 10centtexting.com to make sure you break through. You also have the ability to actually respond to folks. So don't miss this opportunity to actually have interaction with voters. Legislative sessions are coming up. Don't miss your opportunity if it could be communicating with constituents. It could also be elections are starting, in March. Don't miss those opportunities as well. So 10centtexting.com, reach out to them today.
Awesome. And if you are wanting to watch this episode later, you can find all of our episodes on politicaltradesecrets.com. I also encourage you to go and sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider and get exclusive stuff from us at Political Trade Secrets. All of our best stuff, we will be sending out emails. We'll make sure you're aware of different things we have going on. I think we have some interest in doing our strategy book club where we're going to pick some book, do it one episode per week. We'll go through the book for maybe 3 weeks, and then have the author on for the final episode that we talk about it, and to actually talk about the book with them. And we think that would be very interesting to do. So we will let people know through politicaltradesecrets.com. So if you go and sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider, we will be sure to include you with that. And with that, Sean, any final thoughts for yourself for today's episode?
Well, I just want to thank you. You really brought a lot of your insight to this today, so really appreciate that. Thought it was a great show. Really enjoyed being a small part of it with you, and also want to thank everybody out there listening and watching. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for the giving us a great review. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you also for your insights and for your study on this and all the experience that you've had through the years in politics that you've been able to bring to these conversations. So thank you, Sean, for that. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for being a part of this and for helping us to empower political leaders throughout our country to help reignite American patriotism. This has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets. Join us again on Monday at roughly around 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.